And it's really hard to have our reputations go downhill. It took me years to let go of that. I really went through a period of deep mourning. But once I got to that self-acceptance that I am a good person who loves God, who wants to be a follower of Jesus, that's not what is shifting for me. And for others, that those things may have shifted for them, and they will come to their self-acceptance maybe with a different list of things for themselves. Right. But I finally stopped feeling the need to share my story with so many. And I just, in some ways, threw up my hands and I was like, people are just going to misunderstand me.
Hi, I'm Susan Hinckley.
And I am Cynthia Winward.
And this is At Last She Said It. We're women of faith discussing complicated things. And the title of today's episode is, Who Deserves to Hear My Story? This is a question that we get from listeners a lot, is how do they know when they should tell what's going on with them, and who should they tell? And so we kind of wanted to talk about it today because it's pretty important when things start getting shifty in your life. It can feel so destabilizing that you're looking for something solid to grab onto. It's like when you're in an earthquake and you want to hit the ground and just hold on. It feels like that sometimes when things start moving around. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, as someone who grew up in earthquake country, we were always taught, like, get in a stable doorway and hold tight.
Right,
and so
right.
I feel like that's what women are trying to do. They're trying to grab onto something that's really firm and hold on. And sometimes they think that will happen telling their story. And it does with the right people. But
it's hard to know where the door frames are, though.
Oh, there you
Who's
go.
a door frame and who isn't? That's really hard to know sometimes.
Good metaphor. Yeah. Well, before we jump in, can we just both beg our audience to please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify? Social media is not what it used to be. The algorithms have really changed, and we're still trying to grow this podcast, Susan.
Right.
And so from what I have researched and found, reviews on the podcast platforms is the best way for other people to find us. And as of right now, pretty much Apple Podcasts and Spotify are like the two places where people can leave a review. So if you have both, that would be great. If you only have one of those, that would be great. We'll take anything. You don't even have to write words. Just hit the little 5 stars and we would be muy grateful. So,
right. Exactly.
Thank you. All right. So who deserves to hear my story? I think the irony is for me, as I've kind of chewed on that question all week, is that the more public I have become with this microphone, the more private I have actually become, like in my neighborhood, in my ward, depending on the family members I'm spending time with, I don't say a thing. And I used to share way more in like comments in church, in testimony meeting, in different talks. I would kind of talk about what it feels like to be, you know, for lack of a better phrase, like a progressive LDS person. And I did this because I wanted to feel understood. And I also wanted to throw a lifeline to similar saints like myself.
Sure.
I wanted to be authentically me. And all those things are still true. And I have come to deeply respect that my own journey, which is a sacred journey, I think so much. I respect it so much so that I would rather be misunderstood than have my thoughts and beliefs. Can I say my pearls trampled?
Yes.
I love the scripture, you know, don't cast your pearls before swine, but I don't want to call anyone swine here. That's kind of a harsh one, but I do like the phrase about my pearls. So I don't want my pearls trampled anymore.
Yeah, I understand that.
So anyway, after 10 years of doing all this hard work, I'm going to use that phrase for a sec. In the church, we say it's sacred, not secret. Well, that's me. My journey is sacred. It is not a secret. If people want to invest the time to understand me, they can listen to this podcast. Most won't, most don't, and that's fine. Like, that's really fine. But I'm done hustling for my worth, and I'm done trying to prove anything. So that's kind of what this episode is about today. And I hope that we can both share, because we're so different, Susan. And
yeah, definitely.
I think this is a good episode for two very different Latter-day Saint women to share our stories and maybe toss a little bit of a lifeline to other women to help them maybe self-examine that question of who deserves to hear their story for themselves. So, and I do like that we put deserve in that title, who deserves to hear my story. I think it's the right word because I think it has to be earned. And we'll get into that.
It's a privilege, in other words. It's a
Of
privilege
course.
to get to hear someone's story. So you need to be a trustworthy person.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then you don't deserve to be shared with. I'm going to go straight there.
Go straight there, please.
Yeah. We are very different, and yet in this thing we are the same. I also would say that I say much less than I used to. So maybe that's something about I share so much on the mic that's enough sharing for me, if you see 100%. What I mean. I feel like I am well shared and I don't need to say anything else in my own time. But yeah, I've had the same experience. It's interesting, Cynthia, you and I have been in this space for a long time, starting out, in online support and watching people kind of step into this process. And sometimes when I see this happen for people, I see them move into this space, and then I feel so protective of them.
Same.
I know how vulnerable and how hard and scary all of that can feel. And I feel like it's sort of like watching your kid run out in traffic, right? Because people show up and they say, I want to make an appointment to talk to my bishop this Sunday and explain everything to him, right? Or whatever it is, whatever they're feeling compelled to do.
Yeah.
And I just want to grab him and pull him back on the curb. That's how I feel about it sometimes, because it just doesn't always go well. It doesn't always go well.
I think mostly it doesn't go well.
I haven't really thought about it enough, I guess, to really decide what percentage of time, I feel like I get a good report on that or not. But there have been enough bad reports that I know it isn't always a safe thing to do. The people that you feel compelled to share with and the reasons that you feel compelled to do it, I think there is something in those relationships that makes them a little more high risk, high reward, I guess. It's going to be someone like your bishop, your parents, your spouse, right? These are supercharged relationships already, or can be. And so you're going to share big things, and that means that there might be repercussions.
Big things, big consequences.
Exactly.
Or rather, maybe big relationships, big consequences.
Exactly.
I don't know.
It's true. No, it's true. There's a lot to lose, honestly. There's a lot to lose in this situation. There's a lot to gain, absolutely, but there is a lot to lose. So if I could only give one piece of advice in navigating everything that we talk about on this podcast, it would be patience. I would ask people to have patience with themselves and with this process, to spend a lot of time letting yourself unfold, because you really don't have to make any decisions. There aren't decisions that have to be made at all until you are fully ready and comfortable and situated, right? You need to be sitting down again and comfortable in your own life before you are ready to open that up and invite everybody else in. And that includes explaining it all to everyone.
Yeah.
Because for one thing, why do you want to put all kinds of parameters around things that are actively evolving? What good does that do? And I think when
Where
people
you are now
deconstruct, exactly, yeah, you may not be there. When they deconstruct and everything falls apart, then they might think, okay, well, that's done now.
Yeah.
Here's where I am. But I would say to you, having been on this path for 10 years plus, it's a moving path. It's a moving path.
Yeah.
And I think we want it to be that. That's a good thing. That's a good thing about it.
It is a good thing, but it is a different thing than what we were used to before, which was endure to the end. You have everything figured out. You have your certainty. And now you just kind of need to stand on like the people mover. like those conveyor belt type things,
right.
and just stand there and it'll just take you to where you need to go. And all of a sudden, then when that becomes like topsy-turvy, then I get it. I think that's what we're trying to say in this
Yeah, we
little
get it.
intro is we absolutely get it. And I like something that you said a minute ago, the desire to share with people. There is a lot to gain, but it's risky. And but I think that's why people do it, is it's like, oh, I will be understood. I will have my belonging. I will have people on my side. I will convince other people of the way
Right,
they should be
right.
thinking too. And wow, wouldn't that be great if we could all like wave a magic wand and have all those things, but we don't get to control how other people react. So why don't we talk about that for a minute? And I kind of just led into it, I guess, is like, why do we want to share?
Mm.
And one thing I thought about is we belong to a religion that has 12 Sundays a year just for open mic, just for sharing your testimony, a faith promoting story or whatever. So I think it's kind of natural to want to, if you don't literally get up at the open mic on like the first Sunday of each month, to want to take advantage of that in different ways, and to want to share those shifting beliefs with your ward members or behind closed doors with parents or bishops. And so I get that. I get that it's kind of baked into our system that this is the time to share, and it's systematic every month.
I had not really connected those dots until you said it. We are a religion that encourages people to talk about the things that we believe and the things that we hold dear and that are important to us, right? That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of being a Latter-day Saint, is sharing those things. And in fact, I've noticed it's been one of the most interesting things about Come Follow Me to me, as I've watched that program develop, is how often it goes to the record your impressions and then, on Sunday you get in gospel doctrine and it's like, let's talk, how did you feel this week about the things that we studied?
Good point.
And I have never felt like our church was a church where I get asked, how do you feel about this? Until this feels like a change to me, that we're trying to talk more about these things in community.
Mm.
I don't know if I'm the only person who has had that feeling that it has shifted, but I just feel like church has become more egalitarian in a way in our approach to lessons, where there are discussions and we talk a lot about how does this thing make you feel or how does that thing make you feel. So I feel like this idea of we share things out loud with each other is something that's only ramping up. It's not getting less.
Mm.
And there could also be something to the idea that if you've been bearing your testimony your whole life, standing up at a mic and professing the things that you believe, then maybe when you don't believe those things anymore, or maybe when things have changed for you, you sort of want to
set the record straight.
Yes, set the record straight. That's exactly right. I didn't know exactly how to say it, but I think that's perfect. You sort of want to set the record straight.
Oof.
So that's kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about those things. But the other thing that I thought of when you brought this up is that, to me, sharing your testimony is sort of the exact opposite of sharing your story. And I think that probably says more about me than it does about the nature of testimonies.
I don't think so,
yeah,
Susan.
okay.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Because I feel like, in a testimony meeting, we have been taught pretty explicitly the things that we're supposed to say.
Oh, yeah, the 5 points.
Exactly. So sharing your story in the context of a faith journey feels to me more like giving words to all the things that I haven't ever been able to share at church, right? And they're things that maybe wouldn't even be welcomed by my fellow Latter-day Saints at all.
Sure. For sure.
Even if they're the people who really love me, right? Even if they're my parents or my best friends or my spouse, they don't want to hear this stuff. And so no wonder it's so scary. And I also feel like if we were to stand up and start saying these things, then a lot of members would probably accuse us of trying to lead others astray, or weaken faith, or we're criticizing the institution or whatever, when really all we're doing is sharing our most honest thoughts on these same topics that we've all been
Yeah.
discussing,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know.
That's
For
a good
me,
point.
and many of our listeners, I'm sure, know this. It was my silence crisis that became too much to bear and kind of pushed me into a new space because I just didn't feel like I could be really alive. I couldn't continue to live in my own life and keep so much of my truth hidden.
I love that you frame it that way, though, Susan. I always have. For you, it wasn't a faith crisis; it was a silence crisis, and
Yeah, it really was.
I know that means so much to so many women, especially women. I think this is a unique. I don't want to say men don't have a silence crisis, but I think in particular women do. Anyway,
Well, I don't know. All I know is Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart, and I can really relate to that as
you can relate.
one of Mary's sisters. Yeah, but I didn't really seek relief in the form of sharing my story with people close to me in intimate conversations. I did not go that route. That didn't feel safe to me. Instead, for me, breaking that silence crisis kind of took the form of doing things like giving presentations to large groups, writing essays and publishing them, teaching my, precision crafted Relief Society lessons, or starting a podcast. These are the things that felt safer to me than sharing my story with the people that I'm close to in real life.
Oh, does that make you sad?
I don't know. I've thought a lot about why that is. And I mean, one thing I guess is control. If I'm presenting my views to you in a situation where there's a big buffer between me and you, then I have pretty much full control of the conversation.
Gotcha.
Right?
That makes
sense.
I
don't really have to hear what you think about what I'm saying. I mean, you can write me an email or something later, and people do. But, that's different. That's different than across the dinner table or sitting across from your bishop, across from his desk. So that's probably why I structured it that way. As an introvert, I prefer to share in any situation where I don't actually have to make eye contact with the person that I'm talking to. I mean, that's just the hard truth of me as a communicator. I prefer the non-intimate communication of that kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm still not really in a place where I have had those kinds of intimate conversations in the spaces where I'm going to have to answer people's real reactions to the things that I'm saying. Okay. Still not there. So that's interesting to me.
It is interesting.
Yeah. But sharing in that way gave me the relief that I needed. So it's the same thing. It's probably more about different personal style than someone who says, I'm going to call and make an appointment with my bishop this week because I want to tell him all these things, right?
Exactly.
We're looking for the same kind of maybe validation or self-expression or whatever it is. We're looking to be authentic in the same way. It's just two people approaching it differently. Yeah. But I think that understanding why we want to share, what's motivating that desire is really key in this. And I think it requires slowing down and taking a big step back, zooming out, right? And then looking at that urge to share in its full context. What am I hoping to get from it? Am I looking for validation, acceptance? Am I feeling really guilty, like I'm carrying this big dark secret that I need to set down?
I hadn't thought of that guilt. Okay.
Oh, for sure. People feel guilt about this stuff. Am I needing to prove to myself that I'll still be lovable? I got to test it out against my closest relationships to make sure those people will still love me. Am I needing to talk it through out loud to explain it to myself or, convince myself? Or, maybe am I wanting to share because I think it's going to help other people in the room, like you mentioned in the very beginning. I feel like if we understand what's motivating us, then that can help us to make an informed decision rather than an impulse decision. But it does require slowing down, taking that step back, and having some patience.
I really like that a minute ago you used the word relief. I think that, I mean, I'm different enough from you that even as you were talking, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, what did I need relief from? Not so much guilt, but I love that you brought that up because I have no doubt that is a motivating factor for some people. I think for me, and we'll get into this actually, but let's just kind of put a pin in that. Like people want relief from something,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Or many things. Because that list you rattled off, that was good, Susan. That was being loved, being accepted for yourself, validation. I mean, these are human 101 feelings
Yeah,
that
they are. But
needs.
I think they all come into play. And the fact that all of those kinds of human 101 things are in play when we move into this kind of space of evolving faith, I mean, that's what makes the urgency feel so like deeply rooted and so compelling, because we're dealing with really basic emotions here.
When you're seeking relief from any kind of pain, physical, mental, spiritual, like, of course, our human DNA says, hurry up and do it quickly, right?
Let's get this over with.
Right. Rip the Band-Aid off really
Right.
quickly. So, that's good. You just added another gem there. But before we go on and to discuss more of those like deep, human-y, messy reasons for wanting to share our story with others, do you remember way back? Let's go in the way back machine to episode 42, and it was called When the Wheels Come Off. And Jerilee Renshaw was our guest, and she is one of the best teachers, I think, and communicators when it comes to this topic of sharing your story with other people.
100%. If I had someone in a crisis, in this kind of space, there's a very short list of people that I would send them to, and Jerilee is at the top of that list for me.
So how about we play, it's just a 5-minute portion from that episode, because she just kind of goes through like 3 quick points of these were her personal rules for sharing. Do you need to tell others, leaders, family, etc., what's happening? What do you think, Jerilee?
I don't have one answer, but I have a set of personal rules. Would you like me to share those with you?
Yes, please, because they're so good.
So this is a time in your life when you want to feel validation that what you're experiencing, other people have experienced too, that you're not all alone. So my personal rules are, and this has taken me time to come to this, I don't share with anyone who has not already earned my trust. And that's really important. So I know, and all 3 of us have heard stories in our support group about people who just felt such cognitive dissonance that they just felt they needed to go in and either tell a parent or a spouse, and that spouse thing is tricky, and it is important to be open and honest with your spouse when you can, or a bishop, blurt it all out. I don't know if I believe this anymore. And it doesn't always turn out so well.
Nope.
So with a spouse, I'd say be gentle. If you've learned some things that have kind of pulled the rug out from under you, or, knocked your feet out from under you, be gentle about what you share, because it's tough. And we don't want to set somebody else on a faith crisis journey before they're ready for it. I would be very careful about going in and sharing with anyone, a bishop, a stake president, who you're not sure would understand. So I've had both situations. I've had a bishop who had no clue where I was coming from and no understanding of me or what I had experienced. And then I've had a couple of bishops who've been so fabulous that it just makes me feel like, okay, there's a place for me here, because I can share these things and be very authentic about who I am, but they had to earn my trust before I did that. So my second thing to consider is, once you have shared, you cannot unshare. So proceed with caution. Be careful about who you share with and how you share. And then for me, third, this journey is very fluid. It changes. How I would describe where I am today is different than how I would have described it 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And I don't know what it's going to be like next year. And it's probably different today than it was a year ago. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't be very definite about things like, I do believe this, I don't believe this. Just say, for me, the best way to do it is to say, I've taken a big step away from certainty, and I'm really open to a lot of things, and I'm full of hope, but I try not to nail down what I do and don't, because I find that changes. So I'm hesitant to label what I do and don't. And the other thing to consider is that faith journeys are very personal, and you do not need to feel that you should or need to share with anyone that you don't want to or don't trust.
Yeah, there's no obligation.
Right.
I just think that's part of the panic reaction.
It is.
Yeah, that people feel like, I have to tell.
Yes, and you feel this cognitive dissonance. Like,
Yeah.
I used to think this, and now I'm told it's this, and so I'm feeling so confused. And if I could just unload that on somebody, I'd feel better. And so there is this need and this want to kind of purge. But I would just say, go proceed with caution. Step very carefully into that territory, and also be aware and sensitive of other people's journeys that you could affect. Part of this also is setting boundaries on what we feel we can and cannot do as far as like serving in a calling at any given time. We need to give ourselves permission to allow that, I'm kind of in this funny space where I'm figuring things out, and maybe I don't feel like I can teach gospel doctrine, but yeah, I could do activity day. You know what I mean? Like, we need to decide, what would be comfortable for us, and give ourselves permission to be able to find a comfortable landing space in what we can and can't do without having to share everything we know. There's a great Brené Brown quote that I'd love to share here. She says, "Our stories are not meant for everyone. Hearing them is a privilege, and we should always ask ourselves this before we share. Who has earned the right to hear my story? If we have one or two people in our lives who can sit with us and hold space for our shame stories and love us for our strengths and struggles, we are incredibly lucky. If we have a friend or a small group of friends and family who embraces our imperfections, vulnerabilities, and power, and fills us with a sense of belonging, we are incredibly lucky." And so we don't have to feel like we need to tell everybody, but I think it's really valuable and important to have a few people. And Cynthia and Susan, you have often been those people in my life, and I'm so appreciative of that.
Same.
Well, one thing Jeralee said that I kind of wanted to expand on here for a minute was she mentioned how people make the mistake to talk to bishops, to purge, to unload, like we were just talking about before. They want relief, right? That they want relief from that cognitive dissonance. And it's like, I got to say all these things out loud. And when I was re-listening to that segment, it reminded me of an essay that Jody England Hansen had written for the Exponent blog. And it's called "Don't Seek Answers from Those Not Asking Your Questions."
Yes.
And I have heard her say that line over and over on social media in different places. And I just want to scream, hallelujah, amen. Like, we have got to quit seeking answers from people who are not asking those same questions. Because if you're going to your bishop because you think he has the answers, just stop.
Right.
Because we hear over and over from women who unload on their bishops, and then the bishop will say, well, where did you get this information? And she'll answer and say, from the gospel topics. And he'll say, what are those? And it's like, these poor bishops, they are not trained in faith crisis. Okay. These poor bishops are not trained in anything. As far as I know, they do not go to any type of pastoral training ahead of time. They get set apart the day that they're called, and they're let out into the wild, to be eaten alive by ward members. And that's probably pretty much what happens. But can I just read a quick paragraph that Jody wrote from her essay? She said, I have noticed that when people share experiences of being called to leadership positions at all levels, they never say they were asked about their knowledge of church history, complexity of sacred text, stages of emotional development, understanding of faith journeys, mental or emotional health care, women's health care, budgeting of finances or time, gender issues, sexual development, or even if they think the opinions of current church leaders are more important than the teachings of Christ.
Well, it kind of makes you wonder what's in that job interview then. What are they asking?
I think you know what's in that job interview, Susan. We won't say it right here, but that whole list that Jody has, like, those are all the things that are important to being a bishop, and he does not get any training in any of that. So be extremely cautious, I think, when you're wanting to go to a bishop or another ecclesiastical leader and kind of unload, whether that's like the Relief Society president, state president, whatever. So we say it's risky because there can be other consequences, right? You can get released from a calling that you
Right.
love.
Right.
You can have your temple recommend taken away. In my case, I never unloaded everything on a bishop, but I was quite honest that patriarchy was a steaming pile of poo-poo. And you can't really say things like that, Susan, and not expect to get banned from working with the young women.
Really, Cynthia?
And that's a shocker. I know, but that's exactly what happened. And I've talked about that many times. And so I just want to leave, as we leave this section, talking about Cheryl amazing segment. Just for more info, go read Chris Kimball's book, Living on the Edge of the Inside. He has a chapter on talking to the bishop, and it's pretty golden. So.
Well, one of the reasons it's so golden is that Chris was a bishop, right? And that's where things kind of started to shift for him. It was in those conversations with people and the things he was called upon to do that he started to say, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not sure this is what I thought it was. It makes that particular insight from Chris really valuable, I think. The one thing I thought of when you were just using that quote from Jody of, don't seek answers from those who are not asking your questions. I feel like if you go to a bishop or a stake president, I feel like you're going to get answers because I think that they're going to feel like it's their responsibility,
of course,
to give you answers. They're in that position to try to help you, right? So they want to give you answers. And so you're probably going to get either the primary answers, like read your scriptures more, have you tried going to the temple more, all of these kinds of things. You're going to get those, or you're going to get their answers, the way they've answered these questions for yourself. But I don't think they're ever going to say, you should explore that more. Why don't you go searching about that? I don't know an answer. I'm interested in that, right? I don't think you're going to get that. You're not going to get pushed outside the lines anywhere and told to just go deep with that. So I feel like in many of these questions, the kinds of things that come up and really shift for people when they go into a crisis space of some kind, I'm using air quotes there, but when that happens, those are questions, they're the kinds of questions that actually you're meant to find the answers to for yourself.
Ding, 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 ding.
So seeking the bishop's answers is really not going to
because
help you.
For the first time for so many people that enter, this new edgy space, they're tired of other people's answers anyway. That's kind of in some ways how they ended up here, is they started reading the gospel topics essays or whatever else. And do we really want other people's answers at this point? I get that that's the safe thing because it kind of worked maybe for a lot of people for most of their lives. But then they reach this point where it's like, no, now you're meant to get answers from inside.
Right. Because it just might make things worse, actually, to get another set of answers that you don't need and that don't feel helpful.
Well, how about we talk about some of those human 101 kind of needs that we have, why we want to share our stories, and trying to figure out who deserves to hear those stories. And one of the things I thought of is we share because we want to belong. And we're part of a church where it's not a Sunday religion.
Right.
There is so much going on between those Sundays that give us a sense of belonging, a sense of who our tribe is. Brene Brown says that, she says, we are hardwired for belonging. It's in our DNA. So I think we all need to be like extremely self-compassionate with ourselves. I know I can look back and see times where I overshared and it backfired. And I'm embarrassed about that. I was embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed about it anymore because I've tried to give myself buckets of grace, but please don't be ashamed. We've all done that. It's hardwired into us. Like Brene Brown said, like, this is just part of being a human. It's part of our DNA, is we want to belong so badly. And she also said in her book, Atlas of the Heart, belonging is a practice that requires us to be vulnerable, get uncomfortable, and learn how to be present with people without sacrificing who we are. And I think that's just such a big, hairy, messy, complicated thing we're trying to figure out here is it's like, I don't want to sacrifice who I am. I'm becoming this new person. I'm thinking these new thoughts, and that could really shift my belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I safeguard that? Sorry, we're going to right here jump into our third quote from Brené Brown, because she's kind of the expert on belonging.
She is.
She said, because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance.
And that is my favorite of all Brené Brown quotes, because the first time I read it, I said, oh, my whole life has just been explained to me. Thank you,
Nice, Susan.
Brené. Is it? I don't think it is, Cynthia.
Oh, well,
reread the quote. It wasn't a great realization.
It wasn't a great realization. But for me, it's like this, okay, intellectually, I'm sure it was a great realization.
Yes, it was. It absolutely was.
Because our level of self-acceptance is so paramount here. Of course, it's going to be wrapped up into our idea of what belonging is. And so sometimes I think we get it backwards. I think we share with others in an attempt to find self-acceptance. I think you even touched on that when you were rattling off your list at the beginning. Like, if I can convince the bishop or my mom that I am still a faithful LDS woman, then I am. When Brené is saying, no, it's the other way around. Self-acceptance has to come first. Respect you, respect your journey, accept that this happened to you authentically. And I wonder, Susan, if maybe that's one of the reasons you and I share less now in our own private lives, is because I'll just speak for myself, and then I can ask you the same, is I have completely accepted myself as, this is how I practice my faith now. It looks different than it used to, but I know I am a woman of faith and value and worth, and I don't need everyone to hear all the details of that. I've accepted myself on my own, and that's hard work. That's really hard work. But I think that took away some of that itch, some away of that. That's what gave me the relief. There you go. To go back to a word we were using a minute ago. I don't know. What about you?
Well, now I just want to go away and think about all of this for a
while.
while.
I know. I shouldn't ask you questions in real time.
And then come back. No, this is so interesting, because self-acceptance is so tangled up with this stuff. And things like self-acceptance and self-esteem and self-worth and all of these sorts of things have been really hard for me throughout my life. Don't know where it came from. Don't know if I was born with it. I don't know. I don't know why. A doctor could probably explain to you 100 reasons why this is my thing, but it really is sort of my bugaboo. It's a thing. And so I always thought, well, here's the thing. I don't know how much people think about belonging when they do. Like, do you ever look around and think, I really belong in this group? Maybe you do, but here's the deal. You do know when you don't feel like you quite belong, right? And you're keenly aware of that. And that's where I've lived so much of my life, not just in my church life, but in social groups, school, all of it. I've just had a hard time ever feeling like I quite belonged, including in my own skin. So that's been hard for me. And so it's sort of a chicken or egg thing. Like, do I have a hard time accepting myself because I feel like no one else does? Or do I feel like no one else does because I can't accept myself? Well, Brené explains it as, if you could accept yourself, then you could move into this space of feeling like you had greater belonging. And so that's why it was such a huge aha moment for me.
Okay.
But I have had the same experience that you described, where I don't feel like I need to justify my spirituality or anything in the spiritual space to anyone ever again. And that's because for the billionth time, I had an experience where I really came to believe that I am loved by God the way I am. And that changed everything. Someone who's not a religious person might say, oh, Susan has found self-acceptance. To me, it felt like being accepted by God for the first time, right? So, we'll let people unravel that for themselves. That's how I experienced it. Someone else might not experience it as having anything to do with God, but I think the bottom line is the same. And I think that that's exactly what Brene is talking about. And for me, it has manifested in this desire to create space. As soon as the silence crisis got so big that I was starting to feel like I was going to die because I'd never had any belonging in this place and I couldn't be myself and I couldn't say anything, any of the things I'd ever needed to say. As soon as that just got to the real boiling over point, I started to feel keenly this need, this drive to create space within our church. And I figured out pretty fast that space making was going to have to begin with making space for myself. I think that's why I felt the need so keenly, because I realized I was taking up about 2 inches of the pew. I mean, I was sitting curled into the corner with my legs pulled up to my chest and my arms wrapped around them. I'd made myself as small in the church as I could possibly make myself my whole life. And I started to realize that I can't make space for anyone else if I can't even relax here and sit here in full myself, right? So part of that meant coming to understand that I had every right to show up whole and to take up as much room on that bench as I need, right? Or as anyone else takes up.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that verbally sharing what is going on, verbally sharing your story is essential to that, actually. I think it's more being willing to live your story, right? Being willing to inhabit your own story, being willing to come into a room as yourself, to be vulnerable and to take up your space. That is an inside job. That is a shift that is going to have to happen inside the person. And I think it can bring as much relief as actually saying anything out loud.
And do you describe that as self-acceptance, or do you describe that maybe differently then?
I think it is self-acceptance. Like, can you accept your own story? Can you allow yourself to belong? Because I never could. Now I can. Like, I feel more comfortable at church now than I ever have in my life before. And I really do think that's all an inside shift. Because trust me, if everyone in my ward listened to my podcast, they would not be that comfortable having me in the room. They may not feel as comfortable as I feel if they knew what's going on between my ears most of the time, right? So in a way, I'm much less like those people in some key ways than I was before. And yet I feel greater belonging because I'm willing to step into that room with all of that. And I'm completely fine with who and where and how I am. I always also try to remember that anytime that I'm willing to put vulnerability in the room first, then I'm opening a space for someone else to step into it with me. And they almost always do. Someone shows up to meet me in my vulnerability because they also have been dying for some breathing room. I have one quote that I want to read from Kristen Noel, and she says, "Our collective stories and experiences can be the greatest textbooks of life. But with every shameful story stuffed away, we bypass the chance to expand and connect. A missed opportunity slipped through our fingers."
Wow.
It really breaks my heart sometimes when I think of all of the connection that I haven't felt and experienced and brought actually to my church life.
Yeah.
There could have been so much more. There could have been so much more of humanity in it, and other people. The things that I actually was there craving, right? The reason you go to church, and yet that's the one place I could not find them.
Well, and I think that's where you need to give yourself buckets of grace.
And I do. I can see clearly, why all of that is, but it's sad. It's a lot of missed time.
The other thing I thought about was we share, because, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, being misunderstood is the worst. It really is, Susan.
Pretty sure you're not speaking for yourself.
Okay. Well, I mean, I want to hear your take on this in a minute, but personally, as someone who's like spent her life being the good girl, like that was the hardest part for me when everything started shifting, was like, oh, I'm not the golden child anymore. And let's go way, way back in the time machine again. Let's go to Cynthia's first grade class, 1981, probably. I don't know. So in 1981, in first grade, I got my one and only detention of my whole life. Okay. I really am a good girl.
Were you smoking out behind the school, Cynthia?
Worse, I'll tell you right now, worse. It was a rainy day, and in Southern California, when it's a rainy day, there is nowhere for children to go play because everything is outdoors, right? So we had to have our recess indoors in our class. So my poor teacher, Mrs. Mann, we all had to stay in class that day. I'm sure that's exactly what she wanted, 31st graders taking over her lunch hour. Right. So we're in there, we're drawing on the chalkboard, and I drew a house, and I wanted to draw smoke coming out of the chimney. But I wasn't tall enough in first grade to reach the top of the chalkboard to draw the billows of smoke coming out. So I stood on the desk to draw the chimney smoke. And there was a rule that I didn't know about, no standing on the desks. So my beloved teacher, who I loved more than anything, she gave me detention for breaking the rule of standing on the desk. And I felt so misunderstood. I wasn't trying to be rebellious. I wasn't trying to create first grade anarchy. I was just trying to express myself. And it really did crush me that, I mean, obviously I'm 50 years old and I still remember this story like it was yesterday. Right. Like I was so deeply misunderstood in that moment. And why my teacher couldn't consider my history of being the golden child always and show me some mercy, I don't know. But, she was probably overwhelmed with 30 first graders in her lunchroom on a rainy day. So no hard feelings, Mrs. Mann. But that was one of my first experiences with being misunderstood. It hurt, it broke my heart. And like Jerry said, having a few good friends who understand us can be enough when we're going through this like being misunderstood phase. But I think we're also going to need to get used to the fact that some people in our life will no longer see us as the golden child or whatever our reputation was.
Right.
And it's really hard to have our reputations go downhill. It took me years to let go of that. I really went through a period of deep mourning. But once I got to that self-acceptance, enough self-acceptance, I don't know if I'm not going to say I've ever arrived at complete self-acceptance, but once I got to a good level of self-acceptance that I am a good person who loves God, who wants to be a follower of Jesus, that's not what is shifting for me. And for others, that those things may have shifted for them, and they will come to their self-acceptance maybe with a different list of things for themselves. But I finally stopped feeling the need to share my story with so many. And I just, in some ways, threw up my hands and I was like, people are just going to misunderstand me. So Brene Brown, again, she says, belonging is being part of something bigger than yourself, but it is also the courage to stand alone and to belong to yourself above all else. And I think that's exactly what happened to me is I was willing to stand alone and to be true and authentic to myself. And that is hard.
Well, I don't want to be misunderstood, Cynthia.
Well, nobody. Of course, the default is I would prefer everybody love me and worship me.
I have felt misunderstood a lot in my life. I don't need any more of that, dang it. I don't know. I remember being a little bewildered as a kid. We're going to get in my way back machine now. We'll go back to when I was a teenager, about the middle of my teenage years. And I go to get my patriarchal blessing, and there is this line in there about me having a believing heart.
Oh.
And you have to put it in the context of when it was happening, because at the time I was really deep into my rebellion phase. I was a rebellious teenager, and I really felt like every adult in the entire world was giving me the side eye, which rightfully so. I think that I did not deserve their trust at that point. But, we were in this this sort of situation where I loved shocking them and I felt like they loved judging me. We were both doing our part in this.
I'm learning so much about you right now.
But so I wondered, this comes out of the patriarch's mouth, and I'm sitting there wondering, like, does God actually see me in some way beyond how I understand myself, at this point?
Wow.
And then as I became an adult, I felt so often like my church misunderstood me. And I've talked about this a lot before, but that caused me to misunderstand myself, As you know, like it took me years to live into this realization that I actually do have that heart that the patriarch called out in that blessing. I am a woman of great faith, just like you said earlier. And I had misunderstood that. But this stuff matters deeply to me. I'm giving my life to it, basically.
Right.
Still, this is our full-time work that we're doing. But I feel like our church is this sort of perfect storm of misunderstanding, because when people only show up in part, and I think a lot of us do, we aren't at liberty to express what we're really thinking or feeling, in the church classroom, or what's really going on in our lives, then the assumption is everyone's on the same page.
For sure.
And really, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm going to quote myself here, which is a really gross thing to do, but I'm just going to do it anyway because I wrote it better than I'm going to say it right now. And this comes from one of my really early Sunstone presentations. But I said this: what I understand now is the silence that had always seemed the safe path was actually leading me nowhere. Without my story, I'm not equipped to share myself with others. I can't partake fully of the fellowship offered. I can't contribute the largest part of my heart. I can't heal or be healed. I'm there in body, but I've kept my spirit to myself. And my silence does nothing but add weight to the silent suffocation of the brothers and sisters who also came to church looking for that thing they need most. When at last our stories are allowed to speak alongside our scriptures, we may finally experience wholeness and unity as individuals and as a church. So to speak for a second to the title of this episode, Who Deserves to Hear My Story? I 100% agree that not everyone does. And yet there's a both and at play here, because I guess everyone in my church community deserves to hear my story if I'm genuinely invested in creating a space of belonging, of understanding and acceptance.
Yeah.
If I don't show up willing to be who I am and give that to other people, then we are never going to get to the kind of Zion vibe that I'm wanting to feel at church.
That's good. I like that. Can we get really specific for a minute here? Because I think when you're talking about church community and you're talking about even talking to like your mom or your bishop, now we're going to get really nitty gritty, which is what about a spouse? Because I think sharing with the spouse might have maybe some different rules than sharing with some of those other people in your life. And we decided to have a quick conversation with Blakely Ellis, who is one of our amazing helpers behind the scenes, who is pretty much in charge of curating our Say More column twice a month. So how about we play a 10-minute conversation that I had with her a few days ago. What would you want our listeners to know about your own personal experience with this?
Well, first, that my heart goes out to anybody that's dealing with this. This is so tough in a way that can't be described until you're going through it. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, I'm happy to talk about this, but of course, this has only been my experience. Like you just said, this isn't going to work for every couple. It's not going to work for every situation, for every faith transition. This is just the journey that me and my spouse have been on together. So this isn't prescriptive in any way. This is just me sharing what's worked for me. I did a lot of thinking when you approached me about the word deserving and like deserve, who deserves to hear what. And that honestly took me back to what I promised or covenanted or whatever word you want to use with my spouse when I got married. And
Okay.
is honesty involved in that? Well, yes, of course. I think honesty in your relationship, fidelity, career plans, life plans, parenting is all extremely essential. But none of us go around saying every fleeting thought or passing moment that goes on in our head to our
Good
spouse.
point.
And so I don't think that this is a situation that should be any different. So I would say that I really didn't start sharing my personal faith journey until it really started affecting me more than just mentally. It began affecting me emotionally. It began affecting how I participated at church.
Okay.
I would just start crying in sacrament meetings, or I would have to get up and leave meetings. And when it began to affect me on that level, then not only was my spouse questioning what was going on, he was inquiring what was happening with me, but I also felt like I owed him some sort of explanation about what was happening.
And how long had these swirly thoughts in your head maybe been going on before it started to like manifest and maybe how you were interacting with the organization?
I would say the long answer is years, and the short answer to it really coming to a head was a couple months.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So on and off through the years, I was, raised in a nuanced home. My father wasn't active. I had 2 gay siblings, but I took on a little orthodoxy when I was, dating and marrying my husband, which I think is pretty normal for a lot of people in a lot of situations. But through the years, I would have questions and we would chat a little bit. But I, at that time, didn't have the emotional or mental capacity to take on a faith journey. Then it really hit something and really began to swirl. And from that point, it was a couple of months to when it really began manifesting at church, that I had to, again, leave meetings or was crying or saying, no, I'm not going to that class or whatever, just to try to protect my mental well-being. So
Yeah.
at that point, this is your life partner. I did owe him something. It didn't feel like a crisis for the first few months. It was relatively quiet and contemplative, but then the crisis feeling hit, and it was all I could think about. It was all I could listen to podcasts about. It was all I could read about. It was all I could talk about. And so I owed him something. But at this part of my journey, I was binging Lindsay Hansen Park's Year of Polygamy podcast.
Okay.
And so the first time I really decided to share with them, it was, polygamy is a touchy subject for many of us, but
yes,
it was like a truth bomb that I had learned. And so I was listening to it in the car, and I just came home in a panic, and he was like, what is so upset? Why are you so upset? And I just dropped this truth bomb, and his reaction was not what I thought it would be at all. And so it was a really hard reality for me to understand that it wasn't going to be able to work out like that. I wasn't going to be able to just say whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. It was too traumatic and too frightening for him, for me to tell him every honest thought that crossed my mind, or every single thing that I was questioning. And at that time, he wasn't giving me what I needed. It wasn't giving me tenderness and understanding. And I say that with no malice, because it's extremely terrifying and destabilizing when somebody you love starts to go through a faith crisis. But he just couldn't give me what I needed. And I really wanted our marriage to work. And the reality was that if we were going to survive, it needed to unravel slowly. And that was really, really painful. It was painful to understand that he wasn't going to be the person that I could just unload on. Gotcha. Because he couldn't handle it. And that only placed the burden on me more. The burden of just being completely misunderstood. And that was a really tough pill to swallow. So I found an amazing group of ladies that became my comfort and my sounding board, that I would go and talk to all hours of the night about everything. And I felt kind of lost about how to talk to my spouse about all this. So I reached out to Dr. Julie Hanks and went on her podcast
Mm.
to have a short conversation about this topic. And she taught me to really lead with feelings instead of facts or even thoughts. And so I would approach him and say, I'm feeling really weighed down today about this, a specific church topic or about my spirituality. My spirituality is feeling really heavy today. Can we just be together? Can you just hug me? Can we just snuggle?
Yeah.
And that was the start of rebuilding things, because he could be there for me emotionally in heaviness. He just couldn't be there for me with facts or differing thoughts.
Yeah.
And so eventually I just learned to ask his permission to share things. I would approach him and say, I'm in a hard place emotionally or spiritually, and I'd love to talk about it. Are you in a place emotionally where you can hear something really hard?
That's good.
And then he had the full opportunity to say yes or to say no.
Yeah.
And it still hurt when he said no. Like, I'm not saying that wasn't painful, but I appreciated his honesty. And then it gave me the opportunity to know that whatever I said, if he did say yes, whatever I said wasn't going to be misused later on in later conversations. So in the heat of the moment, you just start saying things, and then it can cycle back and come up again and again and again. And so while I do believe that spouses deserve honesty, do I believe that my spouse had the right to know every single thing that I was deconstructing and every single thing that was going on in my head? I don't. And that may seem counterintuitive. That may seem like it doesn't make sense to anybody else, or that I was being dishonest with my spouse. But that is how I knew that we could survive and how I could survive.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because it sounds like, of course, your spouse deserves honesty, but honesty doesn't equate to like a complete info dump of everything. So it sounds like you were being honest in that you were saying, I'm hurting right now. I'm confused right now. Can you be there for me? Those kinds of things. That seems, and shouldn't that in a way apply to like so many other areas in our partnerships? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as someone who's been married about 30 years now, I have learned that, okay, society kind of teaches us like, oh, your spouse is your best friend. They are your confidant. They are there for everything. And it's like, really? Like, that's a lot of pressure to put on one person. We all need, like you said, you had a group of girlfriends that you could get together with. And I mean, again, that's true for so many life situations, not just faith situations. So it seems like that should be obvious to us, but I think in a society where we're kind of told now your spouse is your everything, then you can bump into some problems.
Yeah, and again, I am big on words, so the word deserve, I don't know that I would use that word to describe.
Ooh, okay. What would you replace it with?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to think.
Like maybe we should have just said, who gets to hear my story?
In regards to a spouse, I think that's probably true, because he did deserve some honesty, but he didn't deserve everything. And I think another word that comes up is people need to earn your story. And that also feels tricky too with a spouse, because you don't earn every single thing that you do in a marriage for your spouse, because that's not reality.
Correct.
The reality is that you've decided to love this person. And sometimes that means doing things and saying things and being there for them, or offering forgiveness or compassion when they didn't earn a thing. That's the reality of human relationships. And so I hesitate to use the word earn, but in a way, when he could be there for me emotionally, it then showed me, okay, he wants to be there for me in the way that he can. And that helped build trust back up.
Love it.
And so then I could trust him and know that he wasn't just going to walk out on me, or he wasn't just going to explode on me. And so as you build trust, then you can give more and more and more honesty. And now we're at a point where I don't think there's anything I couldn't say to him now. And he's not, I mean, of course he still gets upset and hurt, and it's still very scary, but that trust is there now, knowing that, oh, okay, we still want to be together. We've still figured out a way to weather this. We've figured out core values about how to be together.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Blakely, for sharing a little bit about this. I'm sure it's difficult when we're talking about like these types of deep and intimate relationships. We'll put a link to your episode with Dr. Julie Hanks. Thanks, Blakely.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Blakely, for that. As I think about people that I would have wanted to respond to this question, to this idea of what about sharing with a spouse, Blakely would come to mind, because I think that she's that kind of really smart young person. Dang it, Cynthia. They're getting smart a lot younger than I did.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. It gives me some hope for the world, truly.
Yes.
Oh, anyway, thank you for having that conversation with her. This one is a really hard one for me. As you know, for one thing, my spouse is listening. So, spouse, you might want to just skip this part. But anyway, I've probably already said about as much about this part of the conversation as I feel like I should. But I can point to a handful of situations. They are burned in my memory across 43 years of marriage, where it was clear to me that I couldn't share this part of myself. So I have a lot of empathy for women who feel alone in their relationships when it comes to this specific thing. And that has changed for me. It's transformed completely, right? But what if it hadn't? What if that change hadn't ever happened? I would have had to make some choices about that at some point. And those are big choices. Or maybe even not so big, maybe just choices from my side, which would be like, I couldn't be doing this podcast. I couldn't be doing the work that I'm doing now if I couldn't say any of this stuff, publicly. So maybe my choice would have been to just keep it all bottled up. I don't know. I knew how to do that. I did it for many, many years, right? And I knew that I could do it. So I am never going to tell any woman that it isn't a valid choice that they can make. You actually can make that choice if that's what you feel like you have to do. We are never required to say everything that we think out loud to anyone else. And that's really all I feel like I need to say about that. I just want to give a full acknowledgement here that is hard stuff.
Well, as we end this episode, I just want to throw out those buckets of grace that we put on you and put on myself. I want to throw that out to our listeners as well, because this is really, really hard stuff. It's hard to figure out who to talk to, how much to say. Like Blakely said, like honesty is paramount, but an info dump isn't necessarily necessary. And so I just think, I hope through this conversation today that we threw out maybe a couple ideas that could kind of get women thinking, who deserves to hear my story, and what are the reasons that I want to share? Why do I need relief? What relief from? All the things. Who could the people be in my life that could be safe? And move forward and trust. And trust that this will work.
Agree with everything you said. I want to add one more thing, which is a plug for online support wherever you find it. It was life-saving for me in the years before I couldn't really start to say things out loud or didn't know what to say or to whom. Online support really, really saved me. And there are a lot of places to find that. I happen to know that one place where there's an amazing community of women is the At Last She Said It Substack chat. Anyway, find your people, whether that's online or in real life, and it can help you while you're trying to figure out the rest of it, because the rest of it's pretty complicated.
Thanks, Susan, for showing up today.
Thanks, Cynthia.
This is a follow-up to the episode where you discussed what to say to daughters when they ask why they can't pass the sacrament. I had a related conversation with my 11-year-old son when it was time for him to be offered the opportunity to be ordained to the priesthood. We had a discussion with him about what it would mean to be ordained to the Aaronic priesthood and asked him if he had any questions. I remember one question he asked was, why can't women be ordained to the priesthood? And I didn't have any good answers. I told him that I hope someday all people would have the same choices and opportunities within the church. When we were done answering his questions, we asked him if he wanted to be ordained, and he simply said no. I was filled with shock and panic about what this would mean for him, how he would be judged, how we would be judged as his parents. And I tried to reassure him that it would be okay that he be ordained and that it wasn't his fault that there wasn't equality in the opportunities for men and women within the church. He simply said, no, it wouldn't be right. I feel strongly about the value of informed consent and wanted to respect his decision, but I had mixed feelings. However, 5 years out from that decision, I can recognize that it was aligned with his values, and I couldn't be prouder of his integrity and allyship.
Hi, I recently sat in a Sunday school class where people were invited to share experiences where they followed the promptings of the Spirit or didn't, and what the outcomes were. The horror stories and fear people shared were problematic enough, but that's a whole different issue. One theme that kept resurfacing was how challenging it can be, or how difficult it can be, to tell the difference between a prompting from the Holy Ghost and our own thoughts and ideas. People easily acknowledge this challenge. The next topic in the lesson was about sustaining leaders and not speaking evil of them. The message in this section essentially was that we should listen to our leaders and do what they say because they are inspired. The leaders know best. The teacher even said our stake president recently shared that he doesn't have a choice about what he teaches in stake conference. He has to share what he's prompted to teach, even when people don't like it or send him hate mail afterward. It was so bizarre to me that we could acknowledge the difficulty we all face of discerning between self and spirit, but then act like our leaders, who are also just people, are immune to that, and anything they say is definitely inspired and not ever their own ideas or opinions. The contrast was so striking.
Check out our website to find everything in one place: episodes, show notes, events, merchandise, voice messaging, newsletter, transcripts, and donation links. It's all at lastshesaidit.org. Want to talk about this week's episode? Watch social media, or better yet, subscribe and join our Friday chats. You'll be keeping the podcast ad-free and supporting other women too. Thanks for listening.